situation where we are not able to rely heavily on automation? Thanks. That is a really good question. It's such a good question that I'm not sure I have a really easy answer for you, I'm afraid. You know, the thing with the agile methodologies, and indeed any methodology where there's going to be, as you say, you know, a lot of refactoring, and is that you're going to have a lot of change, and thus you're going to have really fairly high levels of regression risk. And you can and should try to manage that regression risk through automated tests at the application program interface, for example, with JUnit and CPP unit and so forth. But as I said before, Capers-Jones's studies seem to indicate that that by itself is not likely to be sufficient. That you're going to miss too many of the regression bugs that way. So you're kind of thrown back into this need to look at things through the system level. Now, if you've got a command line interface, or you can glue a command line interface into your application somehow or another and get access to the business logic through a command line, that might prove more maintainable. You might look at there's a scripting language called TCL, or sometimes referred to as Tickle, which might provide an avenue for doing that. Of course, you could try to test at the top layers of the application business logic if you can get at them. If the system is architected in such a way that you can sort of tear off the UI and test right below that, then that might be something that's possible. So if you might look for points where there's a well-defined interface that's presented by the application business logic to the rest of the world above it, the GUI, and see if you can automate there. The other thing is, when you're doing automation at the GUI, make sure you've got really experienced people doing this. And a lot of people get thrown into the tar pit on this thing by doing a lot of learning on the job, and you can really design your way into a test automation disaster if you put people on it who aren't experienced. So if you're going to undertake a major automation effort, my general rule of thumb is that you need people with 5 years of test automation experience to do that. And that's consistent with an observation in a book by a guy named Gladwell called Outliers, where he observes that it takes about 10,000 hours to become an expert in anything that's really complicated. And as some of you have learned, probably to your chagrin, and I know I have as well, is test automation is really complicated. So best of luck to you. It's a very difficult problem that you're dealing with, but I hope that you have good luck with it. Okay, I've got a question from Elaine here. I've heard some Scrum Masters suggest that testers do unit testing at the beginning of the sprints since they have nothing to do yet. Do you have thoughts on this? Well, no, Elaine, this is sort of the typical problem of people not really understanding what testing is all about. Now, there's certainly a lot to be said for professional testers consulting with the programmers to help them create good unit tests. I think if you can build that kind of teamwork into your scrums, that's ideal, and that is definitely along the lines of what I was saying at the end of the presentation, which was, let's try to work together to solve these problems and not be adversarial. But when people say, well, you guys don't have anything to do, well, that's probably not the case. So, for example, what I was just discussing for Lin Yang's question, and I did find his name there, he was talking about the need for extensive automation, and that's the kind of thing, as I said in answer to another question, there's sort of this following along behind the sprint team and automating. There's probably plenty of that to be done. Setting up test environments, of course, is another thing that might need to be done. So really, these comments about, well, you don't have to do anything other than execute tests, generally indicate a opportunity for you to educate people on the complexities and challenges of testing and all of the upfront work that really is involved in doing testing right. Okay, I have a question here from Abalade. sorry, Abalade, if I'm not pronouncing your name properly. Can we have a hybrid of system development in which waterfall principles are augmented with workable agile principles which could mitigate the deficiencies of the waterfall models? Now, the agile purists would react, I think, with the greatest degree of scorn to a suggestion like this. And I've read stuff online, and even in published magazines, which it always kind of surprises me that this would get past editors, that these really snarky, sarcastic, scornful expressions of disdain towards a suggestion like that. But to me, this seems like just one of the more practical things to consider. If there are elements of both that are non-contradictory that can be made to work together in a particular context, then why wouldn't you do that? If what we're talking about here is a strategy, agile methodologies as a strategy for doing better software engineering, as opposed to agile methodologies as a religion, which demands complete compliance to its scripture, if you will. If we're talking about strategy, it seems to me that strategy should be flexible, and strategy should bend. So, I mean, for example, we have clients that have applied Scrum and other agile life cycles to FDA-regulated medical devices. Now, in FDA-regulated medical devices, you absolutely have to do requirements-based testing. You have to have requirements. You have to have traceability of your test back to requirements. You have to have extensive documentation of how you tested the requirements. So they do all sorts of stuff that an agile purist would say that's not agile, yet it worked for them. So, I think, to your question says, can we have a hybrid? And the answer is yes, we can. I've seen it. It works. I think we need to just be pragmatic about what we're trying to accomplish here, and again, start seeing agile methodologies as a strategy of software engineering and throwing out any sort of religious dogma. Now, that said, the principles of agile engineering were defined by very smart people who have been doing software engineering for a long time, and there are reasons why those principles are there. So I think it makes sense, if you're going to be doing hybridization, that you understand a principle thoroughly and why it's there before you decide to toss it out, because you're going to need to replace the benefits that are offered by that principle with something else. Okay, that's something from Thomas here. Automation is often seen as a silver bullet due to overhyping from the automation companies. Shocked to hear that comment, Thomas. What is underhyped is the amount of time and resources involved in an automation effort. It imposes more work on the existing testers to update test cases to maintain automation. How do you deal with this challenge? Well, Thomas, I mean, if you find yourself in this situation, unfortunately, it's often already too late. What that typically indicates, if you're spending more time maintaining your automated tests than you would simply testing the system manually, you've got basically a negative return on the test automation investment. That generally means that you have a unmaintainable design of your test automation framework underlying everything. I mentioned before some ideas about how to design maintainable tests, sources of information for that, and I would encourage you to go out and look for such information on the web and in training and books and so forth. There's a lot of it out there, maintainable automated testing. But, one of the things that I would suggest that you do now is try to assess, if you're in one of these situations, try to assess what your return on your test automation investment actually is, and what is the business case for it. What are you trying to achieve, and see if you are in this negative return on investment situation, because if so, then it's very likely that you're going to have to scrap some or perhaps all of what you've done